Okay, welcome everybody tonight. Our presentation tonight is entitled Sexting and Sextortion, Online Safety. And before I introduce our panel of experts tonight, I'd like to tell you a little bit about how this got started. Last fall, or I guess last spring about this time, I went to Robin Munson, who is in charge of adult programming at the Spencer Public Library, and we talked about having a program on human trafficking, sex trafficking, things like that. We had a couple of meetings about that. We talked to some folks about it, and we were pretty much in gear, getting geared up, ramped up to have that sort of presentation. And then about September, I think we found out that Sacred Heart Church had invited Sister Shirley Finneran, who is a very well-known speaker on human trafficking, sex trafficking. She's out of Sioux City, and she was giving a program at Sacred Heart in October. So we pivoted our presentation, and a lot of these folks up here on the dais were with me and Robin, and we said, well, there's some other issues that would be of importance for people to hear. And that's how we came about with the title and the topic for tonight on sextortion and online safety. So that's how we got here. And I want to thank Robin for all the work that she did on this, Sarah Beth Foxon for her work, and I'd like to thank all of the panel members, and I'd like to thank the audience too, because I know that this was originally scheduled for January, and imagine that, we had a snowstorm that got us postponed. So anyway, we're here in March, and we had snow today. So, you know, it's just in keeping with the season, I think. So the way this is going to work, we are going to have presentations, and after the presentations, we will take questions and answers. Now, if you want to ask a question, the presenters will be coming back up here to the dais. And if you want to ask a question, please go to the microphone in front. You will not be on camera. We will black that out so you don't have to be on camera, and just your question will be heard at that time. We will also have people here afterwards from the Family Crisis Center to answer any questions or anything that you might have. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce our panel tonight. To my immediate left is Kim Smith, and Kim is an Internet Safety Specialist with Shared Hope International. Shared Hope International is a global nonprofit fighting domestic minor sex trafficking. To her left is Travis Johnson, who is our Clay County attorney. And to his left is Matt Burns, who is a DCI agent, Department of Criminal Investigation. And on his left is Darren Hansen, Spencer police officer, and he is our a longtime school resource officer at this point. And then finally at the end is Andrea Keeling, who is from Family Crisis Center. She is the Iowa Victim Service Call Center Coordinator. So we have some very fine presenters tonight, and without further ado, I'm going to let Kim start us off tonight. So, Kim Smith.
Thank you for inviting me. Can you hear me enough? Okay, all right. I'll just give you a little brief overview of how we ended up where we ended up. I actually was the Children and Family Ministry Director at Hope Church here in Spencer for a really long time. I liked being the Bible school lady. I loved being the Bible school lady. And about 8 years ago, I started looking for things to use with our families about online safety because I noticed I had families kind of lined up in two camps. Half of them were saying, my child's never have a cell phone, and we know how well that turned out. And the other half was handing their kid a wide open iPhone in like first to second grade because we didn't know what to do. So I started looking, and I found Shared Hope, which is actually a trafficking organization. but they were just starting to really look at what was happening and how people were contacting our children. And I actually ended up leaving my job at Hope Church to volunteer full-time for Shared Hope, and I accidentally, over the past 6-8 years, became their internet safety specialist, because right after I got involved in trafficking education, I read a story about someone exploiting children in their own home under the parents' noses, never had to be in the same room, city, county, state, or now even country. The idea that someone could hurt a child that I cared about with the device we gave them just kind of shook me to the core, and I just kept going, and like I say, ended up kind of being their expert. So I traveled to schools. I think this year, since school started in the fall, I've seen almost 5,000 students, middle school, high school. And I get far less nervous in front of a room of high school students than I do you guys. So I much prefer. Maybe it's because some of them are shorter than me. I don't know. But as we get going in this, we're going to talk about some hard things. And I'm going to do this very similar to the way that we do it in school, so you can see what your children or grandchildren or other younger family members that you have, how they view it and what's happening. And honestly, we're having to go in and be really honest with these kids to help them protect themselves, their families, and their friends, because we know they're the experts in the room. So we're going to kind of get started. Like he said, Shared Hope's a national, or actually international, nonprofit out of Washington State. And we work a lot in the area of justice and legal. We help states come up with laws to protect victims of trafficking, minor victims, and things like that. So you can Google us and kind of see what else we do. I do have a resource sheet that's available at the end of this that you guys can take, because I'm going to talk about a lot of different organizations that are doing things really well, because that is my favorite thing about Shared Hope, is we're not the be-all, end-all. We don't think we are. And when we find somebody who's doing it well, we share that information. So be sure and grab one of those. Now, anytime I go into a school, when I walk in, especially middle school, high school, I say, I am not some old lady coming in to tell you to get off your phone and go out and play. I'm just as attached to my device as anybody else. I think I have my watch that my very sweet husband thought I needed, and I don't understand half of it. Well, even half would be generous. It goes off in the middle no matter what I do. And sometimes if you're mentioning words that we talk about, hard words during this conversation, it'll start to look up things. So I think I have it off, but the kids find it really funny when it goes off in the middle of my presentation. But so anyway, I tell them I'm not some old lady, tell them to get off, but I want them to be equipped and empowered to keep themselves safe and let them know what's honestly going on out there. And it's really hard, honestly, right now to get parents to show up at things. And I think a lot of parents are really overwhelmed or don't think this is really happening, and they don't know what to do. And so our hope is to have conversations with you guys, with your kids, with your grandkids, and us start really interacting better together online. But when I started a conversation at a middle school, high school, I've even had to go into 3rd through 5th grade at some schools now because it's happening younger and younger. I always start with a trigger warning, and I'll tell the kids, we're going to talk about some hard things. We're going to use words we don't usually use in school, and we talk about what triggering is. You know, if you're uncomfortable, if something makes you emotional or upset or angry or scared, it's okay to step out. And it's been awesome to have Andrea and her team involved, because we do have kids that will bring things up during these presentations, things that are happening to them that maybe we don't even know. So I always start with a trigger warning so that we want people to feel safe while we're talking about hard things. So we will start for just briefly talk about how this feeds into trafficking. And the Polaris Industries, they track about 25 different types of trafficking, from labor trafficking to sex trafficking and things like that. These are the 5 most common types of sex trafficking. And when we talk about with the kids, we'll ask them, you know, the gorilla pimp's kind of like, I know that movie's getting old for kids, but like Taken, the abduction style, things like that. The Romeo pimp is when you have someone who's pretending to be in a relationship with you, whether it's a friend or a romantic one or just a mentor. They're pretending to be in your corner. Survival sex, we know that in every town, big or small in America, in the world, we have kids that are selling themselves for sex to strangers or someone they know, so they can have a place to sleep, food to eat, or clothes. I mean, it's amazing. Familial, we know that we have families that are selling their kids to strangers or other people they know for lots of reasons, to pay rent, to get drugs, to get whatever they want. And then gangs, we know that we have kids who join gangs because they either feel like they have to because of where they live, or they want to belong to something, and then things they have to do to stay in that gang are just unspeakable. So when I go into a school, I'll ask people, the kids, which one do you think is the most common? So I'll ask you guys that. Which of these 5 do you think is the most common type of sex trafficking? A lot of people say familial. Most of the time, kids will tell me it's the gorilla pimp, things like that. It's actually the Romeo pimp, the pretend relationship. And the reason that we're going through this while we're talking about internet safety is because of the internet and technology. That has just exploded. Because now these predators can just sit in their house and just troll and fish for victims. And the pretend relationship is becoming such a problem. And so that's why another reason that it exploded. It was exploding before COVID, and then COVID was just like adding gas to the fire. Kids that weren't online had to get online because of school or other reasons. We were isolated. You guys know all that stuff. So it's really exploded. So a lot of times kids and parents are really button heads. I'll have parents call me and go, would you come and show me how to spy on my kid on their phone? I'm like, no, but I'll come and have a conversation with you so we can talk about ways to have conversations with your kids. I mean, I would be tired of trying to parent from like the defense all the time. So we got to get proactive. We have to start having conversations with our kids. They are the experts in the room. I'll ask the kids, have any of you in the last week or month had to rescue a parent or grandparent or older family member off of their phone or help them? And they'll all raise their hands. And so we know they get it. We know that they're faster. If you have kids, you probably feel like you're battling devices all day long. You probably know that you don't even know what you don't know, right? It's overwhelming. If you had to look at your kid's phone every night before they went to bed, you would never get to bed. You would never be done. Plus, if they're doing something they shouldn't be doing, they've already hid it from you. You'll never find it. So this is what happens. And in order to get high school, middle school kids to listen, one of the things I'll talk to them about is I'll ask them, how many of you have a younger family member that's online? A brother, sister, cousin, someone you babysit for? And they'll all raise their hand, most of them. I said, that's the face I want you to picture while we're talking about this today, because our victims are becoming younger and younger. So if you feel like you're overwhelmed by the internet and you don't know what to do and how to talk to your kids, this is why. Anybody want to guess how many apps are available to download right now? They're not all social media, but how many apps are available to download right now of any kind? 500? Because you got to have an app to order a taco anymore. Our church decided, we live outside of Boone now. We raised our boys in Spencer, but we moved to Boone, and our church decided to put the bulletin on this little QR code. I gave up. I have no idea what we do at church anymore. I can't do it. So it's bad. So 500, this is what we're looking at. I'm about to change this to 8. We are dealing with 8 million. Now again, they're not all social media, but that's why it's so overwhelming and we feel like we're drowning. Because the apps are just, it's crazy. You got to have them for everything. So this is what's kind of happening online. Every day, almost 4,000 apps are added to just the Google Play Store. That doesn't count Apple. Again, not all social media, but that's just a lot of traffic. And then the most used category is social media. And so this is what we tell kids. You might be the most trustworthy person on the planet. You might stay in the boundaries that your parents have given you if they have. A lot of kids don't have any boundaries when it comes to internet because parents don't know what to do. But what your parents or the adults in your life don't know what to do is how do we let you interact with 4.55 billion strangers on social media at any given moment? That's what we're dealing with, and that's why you don't know what to do. So that's crazy. So again, even if your child is super trustworthy, sometimes when I go into a school, we'll do like a pre-survey, and we'll ask the kids through Google anonymously to tell us, do they have any rules or boundaries in their homes? And the high school students always like to tell me it's none of my business. But we like to kind of see where they're at, and then we do a post-survey to see if this kind of moved the needle, and maybe they see why they need to put in some boundaries themselves if they don't have any in their family. So that's what you're dealing with as a parent or grandparent right now. That's just crazy. And then this is what we think is happening. Some people will say 750,000 predators are online at any given moment. We really believe the number's closer to 500,000, but they routinely have multiple profiles. So there's one victim we're going to talk about in a minute that when she was 12, she was interacting with what she thought was 22 different people, and it was one guy in his 30s, and how that ended up. Half of our victims now are actually between 12 and 15. That number just keeps getting younger. Our kids are on playing games. They're talking to people, strangers, all the time. And the kids don't completely understand this. This is a global issue. I'll ask them, what does WWW stand for? And a middle schooler will tell me World Wide Wrestling, but it's the World Wide Web. And it matters because the minute you choose, any of us, the minute we choose to click online, we've now become a global citizen. So our rights and expectations to privacy as an American citizen are very different online. We talk about that we fight about rights in our country every day. It's different when you're online. You don't have those things. Kids will say, well, it's my picture. I'm like, you shared it online. It's my picture now. It's everybody's picture. And then our rights and expectation of law enforcement are very different. The law enforcement officials want to help you, but they're drowning in calls. Most departments don't have a cyber task force unless it's a big department. It's overwhelming, and they want to help you, but what does someone do when that offender, that predator's in the Philippines or some other foreign country? What do? We don't get to send you guys over there, right? If we can find them. It's not like a TV show where they have that computer specialist that can track the IP addresses to 20 different countries in 30 minutes. It doesn't work like that, and kids don't understand that. And then the other thing that I want to talk about with you guys in particular is how many of you, I'll ask the kids this, how many of you have parents and grandparents and family members who like to share your pictures and your accomplishments online on their Facebook page? We know kids aren't on Facebook, but as parents and grandparents, we like to do that, right? My boys are older, and I really have to almost have a note from God now to share something online. They are so anti. Even before I got involved in this, but they are really anti. So if you have younger family members and you're sharing all their accomplishments, there is nothing wrong with that, but you need to set yourself to private on Facebook. And if you need help with that, talk to that teenager that can do that. Because if you have your page wide open, a predator can swoop in and steal all those pictures of your beautiful kids and your grandkids. They don't need to know their name or your name. It's a new kind of identity theft. And then they take those pictures, let's say they want to pretend to be a 14-year-old girl. They just go get all those pictures. You know, do we know a 14-year-old girl that doesn't have 1,000 selfies at every holiday? And that's just, they take that and then they pretend to be a 14-year-old girl and they trick a 15-year-old boy or someone else. And then another thing you need to think about is you're protecting your child or grandchild's future online life. You don't want that child having to explain to a college admissions counselor or a prospective employer how their picture got used inappropriately or ended up on a site that they don't want to be on. So set yourself to private, and we always tell the kids, help them set it to private. There's nothing wrong with sharing things with your friends and family that you trust, but if your stuff is not set to private, within minutes, I can go on social media and I can tell where that kid goes to school, because they're probably wearing something from their school, if they like music or movies, or they're a car person, or they're a sport person. And so all that information that we're all leaking all the time is just gold to these predators so that they can. So ask your kids to help you and grandkids to help you set that stuff to private to protect them. So this is what happens on the internet. Traffickers are going to use it, or predators, whichever word you want to use. They use it to spot victims. So if you have a kid that's had a really bad day at school and they get on whatever social media they're on, I don't go in and call it a bunch of apps as bad. You know, the internet is a neutral. It's what we choose to do with it that causes the problem. Now, when we talk to kids, we'll mention things like, you know, a website that, or an app that lets you talk to strangers is probably not something you want your kids to be on when they're not adults. And they will always know the name of it. They'll be like, because I won't say it, and they'll say, Omegle? I'm like, you shouldn't even know the name of that. Or an app that lets you put vile, anonymous comments about your classmates and peers. And the only way we can find out who that is to get law enforcement involved. And it's not that simple, is it, to get that phone number? It takes a lot of work. So they actually have programs. So if your child goes on after they've had a cruddy day at school and they say, I hate my life, my parents suck, I'm bored, I'm lonely, I have no friends, my mom works every night this week till 10, I'm alone. That predator, some of them even have programs that look for those keywords, and they're just sending out scripts. They're phishing, and they'll just send out scripts to like hundreds of kids. They get 3 to 5 that respond, and then they just start. And then they'll use that information to groom a victim. And when we talk to kids, we explain what grooming looks like, you know, becoming familiar, and we'll walk through what it looks like in just a second. And then they'll use that information to exploit your child. They'll ask for things, money, more pictures, more content, things like that. Anything they can get, they will get. And this is why it happens. This is why it hits everybody. We all have vulnerabilities, right? We all want to fit in. We tell the kids all the time, you don't outgrow this. You know, we don't all of a sudden hit this age where we're just confident all the time and we feel like we fit, even as adults. We all want to be loved. We all want to be accepted. We want to have friends. We feel misunderstood. We feel lonely. I kind of laugh. Sometimes I travel a lot to do this, and I'll find myself sitting in my car eating lunch because I don't want to go in alone. And I think, how old are you, Kim? You can sit alone at a restaurant. You know, but we all have those moments. And unfortunately, we don't outgrow it. Well, these predators, they know how to find that weak spot in your kid. They know how to find it, they know how to twist it, they know how to use that to their advantage. So we have to teach our kids to not put that stuff out there, you know, to not just leak so much private information, good and bad. So this is what grooming starts to look like, and anything we put up is absolute instantly. You know, the internet's moving so fast, but they will mirror your kid's page, especially younger kids. They will mirror that page. If they discover they've got a kid on there that likes animals, they will almost make it look just like it, because then they're familiar, and that kid will click on there thinking, oh, this must be somebody just like me. And they'll say things like, you play soccer? I played soccer. Coincidence? No, they're lying. They will say whatever they have to say. We've got younger and younger kids getting on playing games, and so anything that has a public piece to it, your child is accessible. Even your Fitbit, even that old device you have at your house that you think is not on anymore, kids are smart. They figure out how to get on that and get on the internet. So you've got to talk to them about this stuff. And one of the things we say about, you know, keeping that younger family member's face in your head, I'll tell them, you know, if someone came up to your younger sibling or younger family member in person or in real life, and they knew your name, their name, your parents' names, where you lived, and even your pets' names, would that younger family member think that was a friend? And they're like, yeah. I said, that's what's happening. They've done their homework on your child, and now they can access them. So they'll mirror that. We even have kids that'll be playing on Roblox, kid game. There's a really odd amount of adults on there talking to kids and seeking them out. And then they'll try to get them to go over to another site to talk privately. That's a massive red flag. And so you've got to talk to your kids about stranger danger online. So this is what the grooming part looks like. Becoming familiar, saying whatever they have to say. And then they start to develop trust. Nobody gets you, you know, I'll make it better. I'll talk to you every day while your mom's at work. I'll be here for you after school. You know, I know it's hard. School is hard. Middle school was hard for me too. They'll say whatever they have to say. Sometimes they'll pretend to be someone their age, like a peer, and then really freaky, a lot of times they'll tell the kid that they're an adult. It's weird. They know how to creep in all those little spots. And then they establish secrecy. They'll say things like, don't tell your parents, they won't understand. They won't let you talk to me anymore. This will just be between us. So we have to talk to kids about that. In real life, you have legitimate adults in your life, teachers, administrators, coaches, youth leaders, 4-H leaders. If an adult in real life or online wanted you to keep a secret, that is not a healthy adult, and you need to tell someone. And it works the same online. If you have someone trying to get you to keep a secret, that's not a healthy person that you need to be in a relationship with. And then we talk about that healthy adults don't seek out children to have relationships with. They just don't seem to kind of get that sometimes. And then they'll start, I don't show this when I go to middle school, it's way too graphic, I think, although middle schoolers are getting older and older. But you'll be shocked at how fast these conversations turn very graphic sexually. And they do this for a couple of different reasons. They'll send them porn very quickly. And they want to do a couple of things. They want to shock them, and they want to kind of scare them. They want to see where their boundaries are, because if that kid's already kind of looking at things they shouldn't be looking at, or kind of dabbling in areas. And so, you know, when somebody's shocked, I don't know about you guys, but when I get shocked or scared, my knee-jerk reaction isn't always my best one. And so sometimes they'll respond with what that person wants because it kind of freaked them out and they don't know what to do about it. Or sometimes they want the relationship and they don't want to come across as immature because they're afraid that person maybe has been a lifeline. And so they are like, well, I kind of want the relationship, so I'm going to act like I'm okay with this, and they're really not. And so this happens really, really quickly. We know now the average age is getting younger and younger of exposure to porn is like 8 years old. So big porn is actually paying money to be on all of these apps. You don't have to go looking for it. So when I go into a school, kids will say things to me like, I wasn't looking for this, and they'll have their phone there, and I know what they're talking about. This means porn. And I don't know what to do, and if I tell my parents, they're going to take my phone away. And sometimes I know the parents, I'm like, yeah, they probably will. So what we're hoping to do is get parents to understand your kids are not looking for this, for porn, it's looking for them, and they don't know what to do when they see it. Our bodies respond differently to porn. We get, you know, kind of freaked out, we get shamed, we get a little shocked, and it really messes with your head. So what do you do when you're 8, 9 years old and somebody that you're talking to that you think is a friend that you trust sends you something like that? They don't know what to do. It kind of short circuits the brain, and they're afraid to tell their parents. And so one of the things that we encourage parents to do is to say these things that you're afraid of out loud. Say to your kids, you know, I'm afraid you're going to be online talking to someone that you think is a friend, and they're going to send you something that makes you uncomfortable, and you're going to be afraid to tell me. Or I'm afraid you're going to be talking to somebody online that you think is a friend, and they're going to ask you to send them things that you're not comfortable sending, and you're going to be afraid to not do it because maybe they've threatened you or they've scared you. Or I'm afraid that you're going to be talking to somebody online that, again, you think is a friend, and they're going to talk you into meeting them because because we still have that happening. So say those things out loud to your kids so that when something does happen, because it will, they can come to you and go, you know that thing we just talked about? I just got this, you know? So they have to be comfortable talking to you about this. So then this is what Travis is going to spend a lot of time on in a minute, so I'm just going to flip through here. But sexting is the most common phone call I get from a school right now. They are drowning in this. Kids are thinking this is normal. He's going to talk about the legalities of this because kids are always shocked by this. And we have to always balance the consequence lesson and what we're telling about this with the idea that we don't want to scare them so much that they won't tell us, because we're having some really awful results because of that. So we always want them to understand that there might be some consequences, but we're going to walk with you through them. You have to tell us. The only way to stop some of this is to tell someone, and he's going to explain what that looks like. And then in the world that I inhabit, predators are using the sexting and all of these things to sextort our kids. And you know, I hate that I'm having to go into 3rd through 5th grade and explain what sextortion means, but we've got to be honest with these kids. They need to know this is out there. So this is what's happening. We have people, predators, gross people, awful people, they're asking for more and more explicit material. That's kind of shifting now. They're wanting money. And there's a couple reasons for that. And then we still have some that want to meet your child and have sex with them in person. Ooh, we still have those out there. So I'm not a big numbers girl, but this last one's a big one here. In the last year, we saw this happen. 79% increase in asking for money instead of more content. And when I say more content, if they have a nude picture of a child, then they might want a video, or they might want this or that. It's just really vile things they're asking for. But this number shows a ramp up, and there's a couple reasons. One is the internet is saturated with porn. It's everywhere. It's just everywhere. And our predators are coming in from foreign countries, and they want money. Because people think, well, American kids are all rich. And in a lot of countries, if, you know, $20 is a good living in some third world countries. If they can get 4 or 5 American kids to send them $20 or $100, they've made a great living. It's actually big business in these countries. So that's what we're seeing, a big change in the numbers. The other thing that just happened, this one really got me. Last year alone, we saw an 1,800% increase of sextortion, financial online sextortion, and 93% of our victims are boys between 12 to 17-ish. In the trafficking world, 82% of our victims are girls. So that is a huge thing. That tells us that they are hunting for our boys. They're looking for boy victims. Boys are a little more impulsive. For some reason, they're quicker to send a picture, things like that. And then we're seeing about 51% of those coming off of Instagram and 31% from Snapchat. We're never going to get the kids off of those. It's not going to happen. I don't go and tell them to get off of them. Because we had one school try to ban an app, and that was just like waving it in front of everybody. As soon as they said, we don't want you on this app, everybody got on it. So we know that doesn't work. But we do have to talk about what's going on some of these things and why they need to be careful when they're on there. We've got kids right now that even just accepting like a video chat off of Instagram, they got a screenshot of this young man, he was 13, got a screenshot of just his face. He didn't send an inappropriate picture, nothing. And within minutes, he had his face on porn with his name. And they were going to send it to everybody if he didn't send them $1,500. He called his mom hysterical. She got home. You know, he was suicidal. This is happening all the time. So you don't even necessarily have to send a picture anymore. So I encourage people, including you guys, change that profile picture to a cartoon or something not recognizable, not usable. You just don't want to give out so much information. So this is what's starting to happen, and this is the part that really is upsetting, is we have kids who are choosing suicide because they don't know what to do when this happens. I told you earlier about the young woman that was talking to what she thought was one friend, and it was 22 different, it was one guy pretending to be 22 of her friends. She's down on the left. Her name was Amanda Todd, and this is an older story, but it's really important because when she was 12, that's back when kids were on Facebook, and because we were on Facebook by all of us finding it, and so the kids all went somewhere else. But that's back when kids were on Facebook, and video chat was new. And she thought it was fun to talk to people. We didn't know there were problems. We didn't know what was happening. And for 3 years, this young woman was tortured and just destroyed by this person, again, that she thought was 22 friends. This guy badgered her for a year. He finally got one boob shot of her. She finally gave in after a year. He used that one picture, that one boob flash, to destroy her life. He would use it as his profile picture. She made several attempts on her life, and then kids at school would find out, and kids would just pile on her too. They moved her to 3 different schools. that guy would find out where she was going to go to school. He would pretend to be a new student coming through Facebook. Again, that's when kids were on there. And he would tell her story. And he would ruin her new chance. 3 schools. She was 15 when she chose to take her life in 2015. Her mom has shared her story a lot. And for 3 years, this person tortured her. They found him this fall, finally. He's in Amsterdam in jail. He got extradited to Canada where her family lives, and they gave him 13 more years. I think they should have given him forever. We hope he serves it. That guy never asked her for a dime. For all we know, he only got the one picture of her. He was in his 30s when he was torturing a 12-year-old. That's just evil. So he did this for 3 years. He's in his 40s now. They finally found him. So she chose to end her life. The young man up in the corner on this side on the right, his name is Ryan, and he was about, senior high probably, and he was talking to someone that he thought was a girl, thought he was in a relationship with, and unfortunately it wasn't. They asked him for $5,000. They wanted $5,000. He said, I don't have $5,000, I'm a kid. They drop him to the bargain basement price of $150. They put him on clearance. That kid took the money out of his college fund. They, of course, wanted more, and then he chose to end his life. These stories just happen. I've actually left some stories behind since I started this. This just keeps happening all the time, where someone thinks that they're talking to someone they care about. And there's no time limit on this. You'll hear 3 weeks, you'll hear 72 hours, you'll hear 3 years. And then this video I'm about to show you, we actually show in schools. I send it to schools first, I let them preview it, and every one of them said, please show it, because our kids need to understand.
At Olentangy High School,
I reckon we put Leo or a heart right here.
painting this rock is the foundation of friendship.
Basically, it's Leo, so it stands for love each other. That's our biggest saying, is just always have each other's backs.
And on the backs of their sweatshirts, the outline of number 22. On the front, the letters LLBM. Live long, Braden Marcus.
Just knowing that he's still here with us, even though he's not actually here, but we all still remember him, and our memories are still with us.
Braden was just 15 years old when he took his own life last October. The pain of teen suicide is hard enough for anyone to comprehend, but even more frightening for Braden's friends now that they know why. In August, Braden's mom finally got a hold of her son's cell phone records. She read to us what she posted on Facebook.
At 11:01, some cyberbully friended Braden on Instagram, posing as a high school girl.
Investigators say that girl turned out to be a catfisher whose method can only be described as evil, someone police still have not identified.
They're threatening to contact their parents, they're threatening to contact their peers, their friends, their classmates.
Delaware County Sheriff Russ Martin says his office opened a criminal investigation because of the sextortion scam Braden just couldn't escape. Tonight, 10 TV has that communication between Braden and the catfisher. She tells Braden to download a social media app and send him a nude image of himself. And then it starts. If you cut the cam or you disconnect, I send it to your friends, your parents, your relatives. Is that what you want? Braden replies, please don't, I'll do anything. The catfisher threatens to post his nude image on, quote, every porn site in the world. Braden becomes desperate, telling the catfisher several times, I'm killing myself, please don't.
They're persistent, and they just won't let up once they get their teeth into somebody who's vulnerable.
Sheriff Martin says he hopes teenagers know anything can be worked through, even mistakes. In Braden's case, it seemed hopeless. The catfisher demands $1,800. Braden says he doesn't have that much. I'm begging you, he says. How much do you have? Nothing, I'm broke. The catfisher then threatens Braden with the image she or he is about to post. The relentless scammer spared no sympathy for the teen, whose next to last words were simply, all I'm asking is you just spare me. In 27 minutes, it was over.
So for many people, there was a lot going through their minds to see what really happened and what was the reasoning.
I think there was also a lot of guilt between us, all of us boys, for not being there for him, when he needed it most, and not being able to recognize that he needed our help.
Braden's childhood friends say they're angry knowing someone targeted their friend, but now they're much more careful about social media and who they friend after losing one of the best.
Don't try and talk to somebody that you just saw like one day and just like, oh, I'm going to be friends with them. Like, at least kind of find the background of knowing who they are.
All of these stories are heartbreaking, but that mom, it took her, I don't think she even got the court order. She finally got into his phone. Because just because you own the phone as a parent, Apple believes that kids have a right to privacy. And so she spent 11 months trying to get that conversation. I don't know if I would have wanted that conversation as a mom. But 27 minutes on a Sunday morning. We tell kids all the time, suicide is not the answer. We can walk you out of anything. And so that's what I said when I say we like to balance. There could be consequences, but nothing is worth your life. We don't want you to think that you, even if we've talked about this 100 times and you still choose to do something, these people are so slick and manipulative. For every story of a kid that gets tricked online, there's a story of an adult. I mean, these people are good at what they do. It's big business, these people. They care nothing about who they've just hurt, what family they've destroyed. So we've got to talk to our kids about these things, that they can tell us anything and that we can walk back from anything. And that's something that Travis is going to touch on in just a minute. I hate that these kids felt responsible. So when we go into schools, we talk about that. They weren't responsible for that, but having conversations like this, being skeptical about who we're talking to online, not talking to strangers. With younger kids, we'll say that over and over. Don't be friends with people online that you don't know in person, over and over again. And it's heartbreaking to think that these families are dealing with this. So I tell the kids every other slide from here on is tell someone. We can help you. There's nothing that is worth your life. There's nothing you can't recover from. You've got to tell someone. But sometimes you do need special help. So I love it when we've got the resource officers, the police officers, and Travis, the county attorneys that will get involved here. So because I have to hand this to middle schoolers and high schoolers and younger kids a lot, we kind of have to lighten it up a little bit and give some hope and some things. I'll ask them, how many of you have a nosy friend? And some of the kids will raise their hand. Like, how many of you are the nosy friend? And so this is why I want them to, and I actually have stickers I'll share with you guys too, but so we want them to be nosy friends. We want them to watch out for each other. If you have a friend that's sexting or sending nudes, and when I go into school, those kids know who's sending the nudes. They know exactly who it is. Be a nosy friend. Tell them what we learned about. Last year, the 8th grade here in town had career day, and they had all these professionals come in. I don't know if some of your kids participated in that, if you got to. And then I get to come in and ruin it, because I'm like, that fancy new career you think you want? Guess what? Let's not derail that. So you talk to your friends about this. You say, you know what? Stop sending these nudes. Stop sending these photos. Maybe you have a friend who is missing a lot of school. They're tired all the time. They're falling asleep in class. Most teachers say that describes their whole classroom. But be a nosy friend. Ask them what they're doing. We've discovered, and I'll ask the kids, and they think I'm really stupid when I say this, but I'll say, how many first responders do we have in this room? And I know we've got some. Raise your hand if you're a first responder, police or fire department. Okay. And the kids are like, well, that's a dumb question. I'm like, but how many of you go to bed with your phones? 87% of them are going to bed with their phones. They're not first responders. They don't need to be available 24/7. Turn off the phone. Put it up. Don't have it in your bedroom. I had a parent tell me one time, well, it's their alarm clock. I said, for $5 at Walmart, you can solve that. Get the phones out of the bedroom. Put them up. Get them away. Your kids need their sleep. You'd be surprised. These predators will badger and badger and badger. We had one case of a girl, a high school girl. She was close to her family, and when they went to somebody like me and kind of ruined their online party, they wanted to start taking the phones at night, and their daughter kind of freaked out of proportion for her normal reaction, and they found out she was actually counseling a friend all night on her phone who was suicidal. That is not a kid problem. They were able to get the right person involved. So talk to your kids about what they're doing, but take those phones away. They need you to do that. We know that when kids especially, but anyone, is being sexually exploited or something is happening, they start to dress a couple of different ways. Sometimes they start to dress a little more sexual. Sometimes they start to cover up. So be a nosy friend. Ask your friend. Maybe it's just an odd fashion choice, but be a nosy friend. Ask them what they're doing. Maybe you have a friend that hides their screen when you walk by. Now, I wasn't doing this when my boys were younger. Can you imagine how fun I'd be as a parent now? But you can bet when I walked through the family room, when my boys clicked off a screen, we were going to have a conversation about that. So be a nosy friend. Ask your friends what they're looking at that you can't see. Maybe you've got a friend that's withdrawn, depressed, distracted, because it affects them physically when things, when things are happening to people. Be a nosy friend. Maybe you got a friend that gets upset when they can't be online. They're going to mess up their, is it Snap, Stream, or Streak? One of those. Streak, yeah. Yeah, I know I'm old. The kids think it's funny when I say it wrong. And so be a nosy friend, ask them. And then another thing that happens is you'll see people start to have things that you know don't make sense in their family financially, like money, clothing. These predators will send game codes for Xbox and PlayStation. They'll send Amazon gift cards. They'll send electronics, shoes, expensive purses, anything to keep that person talking to them. So we tell them to stop talking with them and block them, save and take screenshots, and Travis is going to talk more about what that looks like. And then another thing that we use a lot, because again, local police want to help, but if it's not actionable, you guys can't really jump in. You can take the report. So we use the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, NCMEC, a lot. And I don't know if these guys are even aware, but NCMEC just this month released this new thing where if you have a kid who has done something dumb, no matter how it got there, on one of these bigger apps, it's called Take It Back or Take It Down, and you can actually go on there and they have ways now to help your kid get that off. So it's really great that they finally did that. They've been working on it for a while, and it's been great because they'll take all that information and they'll hand it to a local law enforcement agency like Matters. When they'll say, we've got this screen name talking to 6 kids in your school. We need to figure out who this is. So things like that happen. And these guys will correct me if I'm wrong, but we really like to use them because they put together puzzles. Because the other thing that we're seeing happening is if there's a screen name in one area talking to one kid, then he might be talking to 5 or 6 other kids, because if your kid sees that that's a friend of a friend, there's always one friend in that group that thinks it's fun to take all those friend requests from everybody. There's always one. And when I said that at a school the other day, the kids all pointed at this one kid. There's always that one. And so, when we all got Facebook, we thought it was fun to just friend everybody that asked us, right? So I'm going to challenge you as adults, go through your Facebook contact list. You need to get those people off if you're not contacting them all the time. You don't want them having a back door to your kids. So take those things, and Travis is going to talk more about that, and then I'm going to finish up really quick. Talk to these guys. That's why they're here. It's so awesome to have school resource officers. Travis here, because Travis is the only county attorney. When I go into an area, I call the sheriff's department or the county attorney and ask them, what do you want me to tell them? What do you want me to tell parents? What do you want me to tell kids? He's the only one, and I'm not a paid spokesperson for him, he's the only one that will show up at something like this and walk kids out of messes. Because I get calls from parents a lot that say, my 14-year-old decided they wanted attention. They put a video, they got attention. Now we're getting contacted from these men, from this, from that. Really inappropriate things coming across their phone. Is my kid going to get arrested if I call the police? And Travis is great at helping kids walk out of this. So I love that he's willing to come. So just real quick for parents or grandparents, if your kid comes to you with something like this, I want you to stay calm, breathe, don't judge, just listen. Don't throttle them like you want to. Just listen to them. Get that you don't understand their world anymore. Kids will tell me, I'd rather my parents take my phone away than my car. That's foreign to me. Car was freedom when I was that age. Let them come to you. Let their friends come to you with anything. Give them boundaries. One of the lies we've been told by all of these big tech companies, how many of you know how old you have to be on Snapchat? It says, what, 13? Those are not ratings like movies. Those are cover your butt numbers for Snapchat and Instagram. They're not allowed. It's illegal for them to collect information on minors. And I think the last time I checked, it was $75,000 per count if they collected information. So they got fined for collecting information from a minor. It's a $75,000 fine. But if your kid lies about their birth date, they're covered. So don't buy into the lie that Snapchat and Instagram and all those say that your kid can be on at 13. I wouldn't let my kid be on those till they were 17 or 18 if I had had a choice. Ours are old. We didn't have to do that. Give them an out. If your kid can look at their friends and go, I can't look at that. My parents look at my phone. Even if you don't, because you're tired or you just can't get to it, let them tell their friends that. That way you're the excuse for not getting to be in everything. Groom-proof them. And then the other thing that we talk about a lot is don't use screens or devices as a punishment or a reward, because you've just given that device way more power than it needs in your home. So I've got some great resources for you. Travis is going to come and talk to you guys about the legalities because he's obviously the expert in the room on that. But I'm telling you guys, this is a huge bonus to get to have them because they know how this really works. They're dealing with it every day, and I love that he's willing to talk to you guys. Yes, sir.
Two-part question. One, how many people who do this crap online are actually caught, prosecuted, and sent away for life or executed?
Very few. Thank you, yes. It's a very, 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 very underreported crime. because kids are too embarrassed. I've got one kid, the parents called about 6 weeks ago. They did call the sheriff's department finally because $500 exchanged through PayPal. There were 3 different PayPal transactions. She still doesn't want anybody, he doesn't want anybody in their community to know it. You know, this is a 17-year-old, very popular, very well liked, thought he was talking to a girl, sent a picture, and within minutes, 3 transactions, $500, and thank goodness he told his mom and didn't decide that he had no way out. So I think it's super underreported. I don't think there's even a percentage.
I mean, I can say from my experience that the ones that are getting caught, a lot of times are getting caught from sheer dumb luck. You know, a parent happens to find a device that the kid forgot to sign out of Facebook on or whatever, or, sorry, I'm just used to projecting. You know, other circumstances that I've gotten involved in cases came when, you know, somebody actually tried to go hands-on with a kid, tried to meet him in person, and again, sheer dumb luck, a parent managed to intervene just by virtue of being in the right place at the right time. But, you know, it wasn't stuff that the kids brought forward, and, you know, in one instance, you know, we caught him because of the one victim he was going after that got interfered with by grandpa and grandma, but he was trolling, you know, hundreds of kids online, and we happened to find the one who, you know, happened to have in our jurisdiction the one who he was unlucky enough to get caught with. But those other kids, you know, he was just going to keep on victimizing them. So yeah, I mean, it's unfortunately the percentage is low.
Do you ever have it happen that the kid can work with you or you as an officer, and every conversation you're right there with them?
I have been involved in a project where we took a kid's account over. The kid wasn't sitting there right next to us. We just flat out became the kid online and kind of did the old To Catch a Predator thing and brought a guy over and got him hooked on that.
Well, I mean, we go into every school that will ask us, and so schools are starting to understand that. I mean, they see it that it's a problem every day in their school, so we go in by invitation or we contact them and try to get in. But I wish we could get in and start educating even at the college level the new teachers that are coming out, because I think it just, I was telling them, I wish it would become part of like DARE or something, because it needs to be talked about over and over and over again.
Travis.
All right. So I'm going to present a little bit on some of the legal aspects, what the law says about this type of crime, what the punishments are. People asked how many people we put away. Sometimes these are very difficult. Depends on the type of case. A lot of the online people that come in that they have no personal connection to our community. Those can be extremely difficult. It's hard to track them down with just a screen name or a username through Facebook. The ones that I prosecute, the ones that I tend to see a lot more regularly here, and I'll get into it in a minute, is like ex-boyfriends primarily, sometimes ex-girlfriends that will use, you know, pictures, photographs, videos that they obtained during the relationship. When that relationship goes sour, they weaponize, you know, all that information and use it to do all sorts of really horrible things. But I'm going to go over briefly some of the legal aspects surrounding this, then we'll get into some examples that I'll have Matt and Darren help me out with some of the stuff that they've seen. So I don't mean to pick on this guy in particular, but I just went to the Iowa Sex Offender Registry. Anybody can go there at any time. You can type in your zip code, and it will show you the addresses of anybody on the Sex Offender Registry within that zip code. It'll tell you their name. It'll give an up-to-date photograph of them. And it'll also tell you what kind of crime they were convicted of, what the ages of the victim or victims were. And it'll give you a lot of the information that's necessary. So a lot of the crimes that we talk about, that I'll be talking about, have the Iowa Sex Offender Registry as being a requirement of some of the punishment involved, okay? To the extent that it applies, I have that marked in the PowerPoint. But if you go to iowasexoffenderregistry.gov, that's where the registry can be located at. Okay, these are some of the crimes that I'll discuss. They're all found in the codes of Iowa. So first one I'll talk about is harassment. Iowa Code Section 708.7. It's just an aggravated misdemeanor. It means it's punishable by up to 2 years in prison. Dissemination of naked photographs without someone's consent can be prosecuted under this. You'd be surprised how often, people in their 30s and 40s going through a divorce that stuff like this comes up and happens. It's pretty regularly. It's very embarrassing and very hurtful, but hey, it can amount to a 2-year prison sentence when that does happen. Enticing a minor, Iowa Code Section 710.10, that can be a C or a D felony depending on the age of the children. C felony is 10 years in prison. D felony is 5 years in prison. I've prosecuted quite a few of these as well. And that would be, hey, if simply asking a minor to commit a sex act or send you nude photographs can amount to a violation of this code section. So it is serious. We do take it seriously. So if you come across this in your children's phones, you're able to track down who it is or turn it over to law enforcement and let somebody like Matt or Darren start a good investigation. We can go into Snapchat, we can go into Facebook, we can subpoena records for usernames in an attempt to track down who some of these people are. It's not always successful, but there's at least a possibility there. And the Iowa Sex Offender Registry would be a requirement if you're convicted of that last code section there. Invasion of privacy, taking photographs of someone without their consent, naked photographs could be a violation. This was a young woman a while ago. I gave this presentation, one similar to this one, about 5-6 years ago to a lot of the high schools in Northwest Iowa. And around that time, this girl was big on Facebook, and she had taken a picture of someone that was naked in the gym that she thought looked funny and sent it to a couple friends. Just a horrible thing to do, but that too would be a crime. Extortion, it's a Class D felony, threatening to expose someone to ridicule or hatred in order to get something from them. That could be money, it could be nude photographs, it could be sexual favors. I've prosecuted cases with all of those things happening. And it says registry is possible. It's not mandatory with this particular code section, but I would have to present evidence to the judge at sentencing enough to impress the judge that, hey, this was sexually motivated in nature, and then it could land that defendant on the sex offender registry. One example is a pretty ugly case. I had the guy for extortion. I had him for a few different crimes, but he had met a girl online dating website. They went on 2 dates, I think, and then she broke it off with him. Trouble is, while they were flirting, after meeting online, she had sent him one photograph, one nude photograph. They went on their 2 dates, didn't work out, she broke up with him. And then about a month later, she started to get text messages from numbers that she didn't recognize saying that, hey, I saw you in that red thong and, exposing yourself. And if you don't send me more pictures, I'm going to send this to all the people that you work with, and then sent them proof that they knew where she worked. She didn't know who these people were, got it from 2 or 3 different numbers, and they ended up sending the photograph as proof, saying, here's the photograph, you better send me more, or this is going to happen. We were able to figure out who it was. Luckily, something with his phone and the way his text messages worked, it doubled an R, which she recalled being something that he did when he used to text her, and that's how we were able to figure out it was him. We were able to arrest him, get his phones, do a search warrant, and figure out it was indeed him. But that's word to the wise too. If adults are making these kinds of mistakes, what are our kids doing? Okay, they don't have the wisdom and the years that we do under our belts. So I know that they're stepping into things left and right. Sexual exploitation of a minor could be a C felony for 10 years in prison, a D for 5, or an aggravated misdemeanor. Lots of factors come into play with that, but primarily it's based on the age of the victims we're talking about. Asking for, sending, posting, or simply having photographs of a naked minor would count. Something important to realize here, and it's a fine line we have to walk, Kim is right. We don't want to scare kids into not coming forward and telling us about this, but even a child sending a sexually explicit photograph of themselves to another child, they're distributing child pornography. Okay, so it is dangerous. I will tell you that's nothing that I'm going to prosecute, the child that's sending that out. but it's something I would like to know about so that we can get services in that home. If they're sending it to an adult, then I'm going to be prosecuting that adult. If there's any evidence at all they were asking for it, or when they received it, they didn't act appropriately with it. But it is a fine line. We don't want to scare kids so much that if they happen, say it was last week, one of your kids sent a naked photograph, and then you warn them that, hey, you could go to prison or have all this horrible punishment happen, chances are pretty slim they're going to feel comfortable coming forward to you, you know. So toward the end of this, I want to talk to you guys about the process that my office uses in situations involving kids of this nature. We've had quite a few at the high school. I had quite a few in Dickinson County, Story County when I prosecuted there. Just a lot of different examples. Currently, I think I have 4 or 5 cases similar to this right now. And I won't get into those because they're active cases. I don't want to out anybody. But it's very prevalent. It happens a lot. Okay, so 3 things that I like to talk about in this presentation. I want to make sure that the kids and the parents keep informed, not only about what the law is, but do your best to keep informed about the apps that your kids are using, who their friends are, what social media are they using a lot. And do your best to maybe try to set up your own accounts so you can kind of be a little familiar with it. And I'll get into this, having a script. Something I tell parents that I think would be important. I have 4 kids of my own. Don't just sit back and cross your fingers and hope that they don't get a request from a boyfriend. And generally it's going to be a boyfriend, sorry, but it generally is. But don't sit back and hope that, you know, that they'll make the right decision in that case. I'm a little uncomfortable talking to them about it. Talk to them about it beforehand, before they're stuck in the middle of the night getting that request from a boy that they really care a lot about and that they want to impress and they want to stay in good standing with. The best approach to that is going to be to have conversations with your kids before they're in that situation. Educate them. You can talk to them about, hey, this stuff is really dangerous. You know, either of you could end up on the sex offender registry if you do this. Give the kid a script and have them, hey, when that happens, be ready. Have a script, be ready with what your response to that situation is going to be. Simply tell them no. Don't ask me that again. You can use your parents as a scapegoat, something I've told kids to do. You know, like, let your kids know, hey, tell this boy or girl, whoever it is that's asking, you know, hey, my parents have tracking apps on my phone. They know everything that happens. Whether that's true or not isn't going to matter, but hopefully that will keep that kid from continuously bombarding with requests like that. Another example would be to use humor. Some examples that I found online. We have one that I think is pretty funny. Hey, what are you doing? I'm laying in bed. Just laying in bed, nothing else? Well, I'm eating cereal. Ha, nice. Well, what would you be doing if I were next to you in bed? Well, I'd be eating my cereal. Obviously trying to deflect the advances, right? Stay out of that conversation. Laugh out loud. I mean, if the cereal wasn't there, and they reply, well, then I'd get out of bed and go get cereal, right? It's just an easy way to deflect from that conversation, you know, and if you have these conversations with your kids before they're getting these requests, they're more apt to hopefully make the right decision, right? You know your kids better than anybody else will. Think about which angle is going to work best for them to keep them out of that situation. And this other one I thought was really funny. It says, you were literally the cutest girl I've ever laid eyes on. Send me nudes, right? And she sent him that, whatever that thing is. It's like a blue face with hair attached to legs. And the guy says, what the truck? And the response is just zooming in on the blue face. Again, trying to use humor in a way that's going to deflect and get them out of that touchy situation. One thing I tell kids, and I'd encourage parents to maybe have this conversation with them too, is I remember, you know, 9th grade, 10th grade, 11th grade, you think that relationship you're in is the one, right? You are in love. You're going to be in love with that person forever. You can trust them no matter what. And what I try to impress them on is, well, you think he or she is a good person. You can trust them no matter what. How many times have you broken up with them? And usually they haven't broken up, right? So then I tell them, well, you need to think about how are they going to react when you do break up with them, if that happens, and they're very hurt and very mad at you. And you move on and get in a new relationship. How are they going to be then? Are you really going to trust them with nude photographs? That's oftentimes what I will see at the high school and the middle schools is kids that get rejected, they get hurt, they're breaking up, and they're not in great control of their emotions. They react in anger, and they will start either threatening to send those photos out or actually sending them out to people. And for the sake of the parents, if your kids end up in these situations, I'm going to talk you through how some of those situations work out. And I've worked with Darren on some of that stuff as well. So we'll kind of talk about, do that in just a second here with how we respond to those situations. Okay, identify a trusted adult. I tell the kids to kind of go in their mind through who they think they'd be able to trust if, say they've already done this, they've already sent a photograph out, they're feeling bad about it, wishing they could take it back. What kinds of things can they do? Can they talk to a parent, a family member, maybe an aunt or an uncle, maybe a friend, maybe a teacher, a coach? Another thing that I think parents can do, it's a fine line between respecting the privacy of your children and their phones and getting access and actually poking around and being nosy in them, right? My wife and I have a disagreement on that. My wife usually wins our arguments, so her way's probably gonna pan out. But I'm of the mindset that hey, it's our phone, we bought it, we can get in that thing whenever we want, poke around, and we need to be blunt with the kids about that. She wants to be a little more respectful of their privacy. So, there's got to be a fine line there somewhere. But there is one thing that I think parents can do that's a pretty easy thing. I don't imagine many great things happen on your child's cell phone after 9 o'clock at night on a school night, right? At best, maybe they're looking at YouTube and staying up a lot later than they should, or chatting with their friends and not getting the sleep that they need. But there are a lot worse things that could be happening too. I see nothing wrong with telling your kids, hey, first off, I may not look in your cell phone, but I need to know what the password is. You don't get a cell phone unless I get the password to get into it. That's just how it's going to be. I think that's a pretty easy thing to establish. But also, every single night, hey, your charger stays down in the living room, and you plug your phone into that charger in a common area where mom and dad can get access if we want. Not saying we're digging through it, but it stays there. You don't need it in your room after 9, like Kim was saying. Generally, they don't have to take calls in the middle of the night to go and rescue people or help with a criminal investigation, right? So I think making that mandatory, it would be very, very helpful. Having those tough conversations with them. So, and Darren, I'll maybe talk with you a little bit. We've had cases at not only Spencer, but I've had similar cases in Dickinson too, where we've had issues like this come up where there's been a photograph that's kind of been leaked, and we know it's been sent to, maybe an ex-boyfriend got upset, sent it out to a couple other boys at the school, and the way that we've tackled it, and I'll let you kind of dive in when you need to, but I know it's not coming in there saying, oh, we're going to charge every one of these boys. Whichever boy sent that out is going to go get on the sex offender registry, go to jail, go to prison, etc. The first step in what we do and how we handle that situation is to contain it. And a tactic that's really worked for us is, hey, we got the boy that actually sent it. We now know he sent these. Pull him in. We'll let him know, hey, there's all these sex offender registry charges we could file against you. There's, a lot of ugly stuff can happen. Tell us who you sent it to. We want a list of every single person that you sent this out to. My number one goal initially in that situation is containment. I want to do our best to stop that before it gets out of our reach. And we've been pretty successful, I think, for the most part. We get a list of the 4 or 5 kids that got the photograph. We pull them in. The school helps with that as well, and say, did you send this to anybody? If you did, we're going to find out about it, and then we might not be as nice with you about this whole situation. Or you can give us the list of people you sent it to so we can go and make sure everybody deletes it. Our goal is pretty much containment at first. We also meet with the victim and their parents. We talk to them about, hey, this happened, your child is a victim. How are you feeling about what should happen to the others that are involved?
Hey, Travis, one thing that,
Yep.
like at the high school, and there's cameras everywhere in that high school, And there's a thing called airdrop. I don't know if you guys are familiar with what airdrop is. So if it gets airdropped and it goes to all these people that are around this person, it really helps us too to get on the cameras and say, okay, it went to this person. Well, all these other people around here too. So it really aids in our investigation. And being in the schools as long as I have, I feel I have a pretty good rapport with a lot of these kids where they trust me, to where if I say, look, we're not trying to burn you at the stake here. We just want this to end, and we want to work with everybody, and we want the best resolution to this problem. And Travis and I do a very good job working together, and because we know that these kids make mistakes, and we just want to get this solved in the best way that we can.
Yeah, and I think the school's really helpful too. I think they're very proactive on this stuff.
Yeah.
Another thing that I've seen, I think I have 3 cases involving this, kind of similar to the sexting stuff. It's kids getting vape products. And, you know, I have a case right now from Dickinson. I won't get into too many details, 1 or 2 that are here, where girls 13, 14 years old are getting vape products, but that's done at a price. It's not just giving the supplier money. It's, hey, send me a nude photograph so I know I can trust that you won't turn me in. And that turns into, hey, do you want more vape products? Well, you got to send me more pictures. Or you got to meet and let me touch you in a certain way. We've had a few cases. Somebody was sent to prison last year out of Clay County for about 25 years for conduct like that came to light. Vape products are all over the place. I think, Darren, you shared a photograph on Facebook 6-8 months ago of how many you've gotten, but if you want to maybe share a little bit of that.
Yeah, vaping is a huge issue in our schools. I've taken one off a 10-year-old in our schools. So you think about a 10-year-old, where are they getting that vape? You know, a big problem. It's not the same as an old cigarette. You know, back when I was growing up, both my mom and dad smoked, and I tried one. It's like, that thing tastes horrible. You know, they don't make them like that anymore. They're all kinds of shapes and sizes, and they are highly addictive. You know, so when these young kids, their bodies are actively growing, their brain is actively growing. Well, they're more susceptible to that addiction. And you talk to a 13, 14-year-old girl that's addicted to these vapes. Well, how are they getting them? What are they going to do? They don't have a job. You know, they can't get money from mom and dad. Hey, Mom and Dad, give me money for a vape. You know, that's not going to happen. What do they have? You know, they have themselves. So, unfortunately, we see that, and it's sickening to me. One thing that I'm starting to do now, if I deal with vapes several times a week. One thing I'm starting to do now with like the females that we're getting vapes off of, I'm having some really tough conversations with parents just of what I'm seeing, some questions that maybe you want to talk to your daughters about, just kind of filling them in, and it's, some of them have no idea that that's what's happening, and it's very sad.
Yeah, so that's a really important point. I think parents, when it comes to vaping, we're not saying that the majority of the kids that are vaping are exchanging, lewd photographs of themselves to get that, but it does happen. It happens a lot. Don't assume that the worst thing going on with your kid when you catch them with the vape is just that they're using nicotine. Ask those hard questions. Don't just ground them and say that's it. Make them turn over where they got that from. Make them explain to you what they did to get that. It wasn't free, okay? It wasn't free. So ask those tough questions. Try to get to the bottom of it to make sure there isn't something worse going on, okay? Because I definitely have had cases where there is something worse going on, and a lot of bad things can happen leading up to that. Matt, I know Matt Burns works for the DCI, Department of Criminal Investigations. He covers what, 8 counties, 6 counties?
Northwest Iowa.
Okay, Northwest Iowa. If there's ever a homicide or a really bad sexual abuse, some of the sexual predators that we see online, where they can set up sting operations, Matt gets called in to do a lot of that. I've worked some cases with him. And I know you and I have talked a few times about the types of kids that you see getting roped up into this, and that it might be surprising. It's not always the kids that society might expect, for better or for worse. But if you have anything to add with that, I think it'd be a good time.
You know, all kids are susceptible to it, because as the cases I've worked, you know, what Kim was talking about earlier, it's not just hypothetical stuff. A lot of times you hear they're doing this, they're doing that, and I can tell you that they really are doing that. These are cases that I've legitimately seen where these predators are very, very good at grooming these young people. A lot of times it just starts off with a little bit of praise about how attractive somebody is when they see them online, and for some folks, and you got to remember, when you know you're a teenager, boy or girl, it doesn't take a lot to be a little bit insecure. I mean, the most popular kids in school still have their insecurities, right? They still worry about how they look and how they present to their peers and others. So, you know, I had one of my first investigations was actually, I hate to say it, a retired police officer, 60-some years old, out on the East Coast, who was posing as a 24, 25-year-old female, and joining up on Facebook groups online. And he got very good at, you know, again, giving praise as far as how you know, a girl was looking. But then as soon as she wasn't doing what he wanted, withdrawing that praise, and now he's going to have some mean talk and make her feel bad about herself. And anybody's susceptible to that. You know, it really isn't just the kids that you look at and like, oh, they're the lonely kids at school. I mean, it's the popular kids who are susceptible too. And I say that because I don't want to give anybody a false sense of security, but at that same time, a number of cases that I have worked seem to have involved girls who they were isolated. They were maybe bored. A couple of them started during the summer, so we're out of school. They lived out in the country, so had limited access to actually being able to hang out with friends in person. So what do? They've got their phone or their tablet, whatever the case may be, and they're going online and meeting people. And when that's your opportunity for social interaction, then again, if somebody starts to threaten to deny you positive social interaction, you're going to do what it takes to keep the compliments flowing and to keep the conversation flowing. And then from there, absolutely, it'll segue into gift giving and starting to escalate what's being asked for.
I guess to close out my presentation, I hope that if there's a family dealing with this, that you can put myself or law enforcement into that identify a trusted adult category, that it won't be just out of your hands as soon as you come into my office, okay? I don't just take that information and say, your input doesn't matter anymore, I'm gonna prosecute this if I want to. I work a lot with all the victims in my cases. I do all the domestic abuse here, all the sex abuse here in Clay County, and I meet with every one of those victims. I make sure they have a voice in how the process is handled. Ultimately, it is my call, but I do take a common sense approach. I am tough when I need to be, and I take it very seriously, as do law enforcement here. Every law enforcement agent I've worked with here in Clay County has been just wonderful. They have a lot of common sense. They have a lot of decency when it comes to dealing with victims, and it makes my job so much easier. And when it comes to finding trusted adult community resources, I think it's a good segue to have Andrea come in. I do work with her and her organization a lot, Maggie back there as well. Anytime I have victims in cases, these ladies come with them. They help them through depositions, help them through the trial process, help them every stage of the way. I've seen them sit there and hold hands with them, rub their backs during depositions, or even just with meetings with me when they have to talk about really tough stuff. So I'd like to commend you guys for the work you do. Can't thank you enough. I appreciate it. And hopefully that's a good segue for you to come up and talk about what a great resource you guys are.
Okay, so you guys have been given a lot of kind of scary information here tonight. So we just want to introduce ourselves as another resource in the community that a lot of times people don't know about until terrible things are already happening. So we are what's called family crisis centers. We serve the victims and survivors of violent crime. I've put the contact information for the local advocates up here. When we did this, we did not have the members of CASA with us, but I want to point them out over here as well. There is Maggie and Robin, who are from CASA, which stands for Centers Against Abuse and Sexual Assault, correct? Right, good, I got it. So between our two agencies, we will advocate for victims of any crime in this area. We are the ones that you will deal with. This 800 number is to the Iowa Victim Service Call Center. So you will get at any time, day or night, 365 days a year, you will get access to a live advocate on the phone whenever you have need or someone you know has need of someone to talk to. Our lines are 100% confidential. They are available to you at no cost, and we serve, like I said, any crime at all. And we're going to talk more about that here in just a moment. We're also available by text. And while that might not appeal to any of you here in this room, if you are dealing with children, like we were talking about tonight, this may be the resource that they like best, because that is 100% confidential and 100% anonymous. They do not have to give out any information about themselves, their age, their location, their names, anything. They can just talk to somebody who can give them good advice and access to resources in their area. And these are the websites where you can access this as well. CASA also has theirs, which is casaonline.org, correct? Okay, CAASA online.org. And I apologize again because I didn't have you guys on here. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about advocacy. What is it? Who are we? What do we do? So I can read you, these definitions out of the dictionary, but just know that advocate is both a noun and a verb. This is who we are and what we do. I am an advocate, and I will advocate for people that I work with, any of our clients, anybody in our community. We are here to help you, support you, and offer resources. We are not here to tell you what to do. We are not here to offer judgment or try to replace our opinions for yours. We are here to listen to you and to find out what it is that you want to do and how you want to proceed in your life, how you want to handle whatever tough issue you may be dealing with, and to help you figure out how you want to move forward from there. We're here to walk beside you. We are not here to drive the bus. So how can we help you? These are all the services that we offer, and a lot of these are not going to apply to what we were talking here tonight, but I just want you to know these things are available for any person in the community who might need something. First off is the 24-hour crisis line. So we're there available to talk to anybody who is dealing with things like we were talking about tonight at any point in time. We do crisis counseling. The biggest thing we do is the legal, personal, and mobile advocacy. That is what advocates like us are. And our other advocate out there sitting at the table, wave hi, Bianca, we will go and meet with people in person. So when we went out and talked to the kids in the school, we let them know, we can come directly to the school and talk to you. This can be completely confidential. They can pull you out of class. We can talk to you in an office or it's just somewhere private. It does not have to be a big deal. We'll make sure that everybody's privacy is respected. So let's talk about who we can help. Anybody, absolutely anybody who is struggling with any sort of victimization. This is taken from my presentation about domestic violence, but any part of what we talked about up here tonight, you are a victim of violence. If that's emotional, sexual, verbal, physical, you are a victim and we will help you. There are absolutely no barriers to our service. All you have to do is be willing to identify yourself as somebody who needs our help. That's it. That's all that's got to happen. There are zero costs. We will never ask people that we provide services to pay for any of our services. We are actually not even funded by taxpayers. We are funded through a fund, and it gets a little too into it, but basically, criminals. They have to pay fines and restitutions and things like that. That gets set inside into a fund, and that's how our services get funded, through grants. We have an extremely strict confidentiality policy. It is stricter than HIPAA. We are not allowed to talk to people about who our clients are or what they are dealing with. We will, sometimes that causes a little friction because that can be at odds with things that like law enforcement or prosecution would like, but we are actually restricted by law, by how we can talk to people. We are not mandatory reporters, and that is very specifically something that was written into law like that. We want people to be safe coming to us, to feel that they are still in charge of their information. So that causes a little bit of friction in the community. It can, but it was written that way to make make victims feel like they have support and that they can be in charge of how their case gets handled, how their information gets disseminated, and basically what happens to them next. We are what's called permissive reporters. We are allowed to reveal certain things if there is an imminent danger, and it has to be imminent. We do view child sexual abuse as imminent danger, but it really depends upon the circumstances. If somebody tells me that they were abused by an uncle who is dead or who is already off in prison, that's not an imminent danger. If they're telling me that they're going to go home and be abused that night, that is an imminent danger. But again, we always try to work with the client themselves to help them make the report instead of taking that choice away from them. So we do have a policy regarding serving minors, and I believe CASA's is probably the same. We are allowed to serve minors for up to 8 sessions in person without parental consent. And again, that's written that way because oftentimes the people who are abusing children are their guardians and caretakers. So it's important for them to be able to access our services without parental consent. After 8 sessions, we have to get some signatures, but we don't always have to tell. But if they call the call center to our 800 number, or if they're texting in, there's no limit. We do not restrict any services to minors in that way. And again, they don't have to tell us who they are. They don't have to identify where they are, who they're calling about, what their names are, any part of that. They can stay strictly anonymous when they call our call center or if they text our text line. So what types of crime do we help? All of them. I wrote you a list here, but basically, if it's a crime, we help you. And the ones we're talking about here could be more like, bullying, relationship violence, sexual assault, and some things, human trafficking. These are all sort of touching on the subjects that we talked here tonight. But any crime is something that we can help you with. What if you're not sure what's happened to you is a crime? That's okay. Call us anyway. We do not require anybody to make a police report in order to work with us. There's no, like I said, there's no barrier to accessing our services. It doesn't matter to us if you ever want to talk to police or if you ever want to make a report about this. We are still here to help you. We will walk along whatever path with you, and you are in charge. You drive the bus. We are just here to let you know what options are and provide you with the resources to get you where you want to be in your life. A lot of times, kids just don't know how to talk to somebody or who to talk to. They know if they talk to their parents, they're going to freak out, and they don't know how to handle that because now they're dealing with their parents' emotions on top of everything else. They can talk to us because we're not we're that one step removed. We can help them kind of calmly work through what those things are, what's going on in their lives. But a lot of times what we see is that the person who is hurting them, they're attached to that person, because a lot of times it's a friend or a family member in their life, somebody, a friend at school, their boyfriend, whoever, and they don't want that person to get in trouble. And that is the biggest thing that we see, or one of the biggest things that we see is hard for kids, because they don't want to have to tell on somebody. So they can talk to us first. And like I said, we're not mandatory reporters. We are actually prohibited by law from telling things unless the client has given us permission to. So we are a really safe person to talk to. And they can also call us if they just have a friend or a family member. If any of you know that somebody in your life is struggling with any of those things, domestic violence, relationship violence, sexual assault, cyberbullying, anything like that, and you want to know how to help them, call us up. We'll talk you through it. We'll give you resources, and we'll put you in touch with the people who can help you. We will talk through you. Even if you never want to talk to anybody in person, if you just want to talk to us on the phone, we'll talk to you as many times as you want and help walk you through that process. So, what if I never report the crime? That's okay. That is absolutely not a requirement to talk to us. Like I said before, the victim is in charge when it comes to us. We will never do anything to harm them, and we will never do anything without their permission or consent. Even if at some point in time I do feel that, if I come into a situation where that is an imminent danger and I feel like somebody's got to know, I will never do it without telling them. It's never going to be a surprise. That it's just not, it goes against everything that we stand for, to do things without people's knowledge or consent. So it does not matter to us if you ever intend to report what happened, or if something happened to you 20 years ago and it's too late to report it. It doesn't matter to us. If it didn't happen in this state, doesn't matter to us. If it happened outside of the country, we don't care. You can talk to us about literally anything. And like I said, a crime is still a crime, even if you never tell, even if it's somebody you don't want to tell on. What happened to you is still a crime, and you still deserve to get the services from us and have that support. And this is something that I talk to the kids. What if I'm too ashamed or embarrassed? We do not judge. I don't care if this is the first time or the 100th time that somebody has sent a nude photograph or has been victimized in any other way that makes them feel shamed. We will never judge them, and we will not judge them for the choices that they make, even if those choices go against what our personal opinions may be. This is training that we go through that's very strict, how to take our own personal biases out of the equation when we were trying to help people. So people can rest assured that when they call us, they are just going to get kind and compassionate services from us. We're going to help them figure out what they want to do with their lives. So, and this is the thing I like to close out with the kids. If someone's mistreating you, it is not your fault. Even if you sent them that nude photo first, even if you were looking for attention, even if you feel, or somebody in your life has made you feel that what is happening to you is somehow your responsibility, you're wrong. They're wrong. When you are being mistreated, it is not your fault. Everyone deserves to live a life free of violence, and that's what we are here to help you with. And that's the end of my presentation.
At this time, I think maybe there might be some questions that people would have for some of our panel. And if you would come up to the mic so that the people who would be watching could actually hear the question, that would be good. I think that mic is on, isn't it? Okay, it is on right now. So if there's anyone who has a question, please go to the mic, and I'm sure that we'll have some answers up here for you.
You mentioned, I think, or alluded to, so this is like a two-part question, and they're not necessarily related. one, the statute of limitations. Is there a statute of limitations on some of these egregious behaviors that you're dealing with? And two, I wonder, do any of you know what is the actual policy of the Spencer Community School System about to what extent are kids having their cell phones in class? I'm a long way from high school, but I wonder if they're in their possession, or did they leave them at the door? Do they leave them in their locker, and you must not have them until you leave the building? I'd just like to know some particulars. Thank you.
I'll let you start on the limitations.
Okay, statute of limitations. So, there's some interesting laws that they've been trying to pass a couple years, really extending the statute of limitations for crimes, especially sexual crimes against children. I think there may even be one they were trying to push through this year that would do away with it altogether with certain crimes. As it stands right now, I don't. It's been a while since I've looked at this, to be honest. But after, say, a child is abused at age 6, I have prosecuted. I have cases right now that are more than 10 years old that we are going back, tracking down who did this. It's obviously a lot more difficult the older the case is. The evidence isn't going to be there. It's almost always going to end up being, the child's word from their memories 10 years ago against the perpetrator. But after the child turns 18, it goes years after that. And I think it's 10 years right now. So we'd have till the child is 28 years old to report any crime of violence against that child from before age 18. Otherwise, on most offenses, it's going to be 3 years statute of limitations. Unless it's homicide, then we can get that anytime. And Matt, you know a lot of that stuff too, if you have anything to add.
Yeah, I'm trying to think. It's always something I have to go back and look up every time I have a case come across my desk. But I think federal statute of limitations might extend out beyond 3 years, even for the non-hands-on crimes, like for some of those exploitation and online enticement crimes. But again, that's a statute I always have to look up when it looks like I might have something coming down the pike on that. But yeah, generally speaking, if you're talking about something running through the state code, it's going to be 3 years for a felony like that.
Again, unless it's abuse against a child, then we have 10 years after they turn age 18. So if a child does come forward, say if a 25, 26-year-old comes forward and says, hey, my uncle did something to me when I was 7, I can prosecute that. Then I think there's still a question on the table about cell phones in class.
As far as the cell phones in school, I really probably don't know the school policy as well as I should, because I deal with more of the legal stuff, and that's a school policy. My personal opinion is there's way too many phones. There shouldn't. I wish we didn't have any phones, and I tell the kids, if I ever got my way, you wouldn't have your phone at all in school. But I believe that they can't have them, and Steve, you might know this too. They can't have them in the classroom, but I know that they do. But they're everywhere in the school.
I asked Mr. Heeman that, and he said, honestly, they've quit fighting it. He said, my teachers would be policing it all day long, and so they've just chosen to have to deal with it. They used to take them away. They don't want to see them, but he said it would be a constant battle between the teachers. And I know that my sister's a teacher in another place, and she said that when it became a distraction in her classroom, she said, I don't touch that phone. She had paper bags. She would have the kid put it in. She says, if my fingerprints are on that phone and that phone gets broken or has inappropriate content on there, how am I going to say I didn't do that? I don't want. So teachers are really in a tough spot, and schools really are.
Yeah, phones cause a lot of issues. I mean, it's so easy with the texting and all the social media apps. And I just dealt with something that happened over the weekend. Didn't even happen in our school, but we had all kinds of kids going back and forth and making threats and doing this and doing that. And it ends up coming into the school because they're at school, and so that's why I wish we didn't have them at all, but that's just my opinion.
Speaking of phones, there's one big red flag that hasn't been discussed here that you need to keep an eye open for. We've talked about some of the social media apps, and there's so many you can't even cover them, and there are a lot of apps out there that market themselves as gaming apps, and it's all social media, and it ends up being populated by 30, 40, 50-year-old perverts out there. It's not gaming, it's hooking up with kids. But one thing you need to keep an eye open as a guardian of a kid is like the secure storage or calculator apps. There are apps out there that they look like a calculator on your phone. It has a shell. It functions as a calculator. You can do 1 + 1 and find out that it equals 2 on that app. But that it doubles as you put in your passcode, and that is usually an encrypted app that is storing pictures, videos. A lot of times you can put other apps within it. A lot of phones, my phone has a secure app on here, or a secure folder that I've got to put an additional password in. That's where I put like my banking stuff and stuff like that I want just an extra layer of security. But if your kid has one of those apps on there, again, you got to be asking, what do you need this extra password, this extra security beyond what you've already got on your phone? So again, take a look at those phones. Your phone already has a calculator app built into it, so why are you downloading another calculator? Take a look at the size of your apps. If you go into a phone settings and look under apps, it'll have the size of all those apps listed when you download them. I just looked here tonight. I think the app that's on my phone that just is native to the phone, the calculator, is like, I wrote it down, like 6.5 megabytes or something like that. It's a small app because it's just a calculator, but those storage apps get much, much bigger. So if you see a calculator app on there that's taking up 20, 30 megabytes of storage or more, again, you got to be asking questions of, why is that on your phone, and make them get you into it. So that's my little soapbox additional on some of these apps that are out there.
Are you working with the state reps, state senators, governor's office on getting some laws on it? You got the hands-on experience with this, and so is everybody doing that? And is there any phone calls that we can make to them and say, hey, we need to talk about this? Thank you.
It's a really good question. With sexting, I'm not aware of any big laws that they're trying to push through right now, things that could help us. I will tell you that I'm in the middle of trying to write like an op-ed thing for the local paper here in support of some legislation that is making its way in Des Moines right now. I'm a huge advocate for. They're going to hopefully do away with criminal depositions as it relates to the crimes that I prosecute. I'll tell you, one of the hardest things for me is to have a victim of a really horrendous crime meet with me. They want me to prosecute this case. I'm doing it, and then I get the notice of depositions from defense, and I have to sit down with that victim. If it's a child victim, let's say, I've got to have them review their long, detailed statement to a place called Child Advocacy Center, where they go into detail about the sexual assault or sexual assaults that were committed upon them. I have to bring them in and say, listen, I know you already told somebody about that, but now we got to do depositions. The defendant's attorney gets to ask you a ton of questions about anything they want that they think is relevant to this. That includes going into detail again about what happened to you. And I have to bring those kids in on under oath. They're allowed to be asked a bunch of questions. So I have to sit down with them, have them watch their CAC interview again to prepare them so they remember everything. Then they get to repeat it again for the defense attorney under oath. It's a difficult process. It's hard on adult women that are victims of domestic violence too. Oftentimes, if they were married, they might be leading into a divorce that's coming. And now a defense attorney gets to call that victim in under oath and ask them a bunch of questions that are even remotely related to the abuse that happened. Hey, did you use any illegal drugs? Have you ever used illegal drugs? Did you ever cheat on your husband? Did you do this? Did you do that? A lot of things that usually wouldn't even be allowed in a criminal trial, they're allowed to bring up in that deposition, and they've got that victim under oath. Iowa is one of only 8 states that currently allows criminal depositions. Okay, you want to make a big difference and make prosecutors stronger at what they do and protect victims. Pushing for that legislation is a big deal. I was just told tonight that Monday they're having a big meeting in Des Moines. I coach mock trial. My mock trial kids are actually going to Des Moines Monday to compete in state. I wasn't going to be able to make it. I just have so much going on at the office. But after hearing that this is up for debate, this law, that's a big deal. So I'm probably going to jet down to Des Moines and clear my docket for Monday so that I can make that happen. Another part of the legislation that's being pushed in that same bill as taking depositions out is allowing the CAC interview, the Child Advocacy Center interview. So any child that's sexually abused is sent automatically to that CAC. They have a professional interviewer there that sits down with the child, builds rapport. They record the entirety of their interactions, and they get to the bottom of the abuse that happened. I'm usually not allowed to introduce that as evidence at trial. It's a pretty rare occasion when I'm able to successfully do that. It's very difficult. All the stars have to align. I have all these factors the court says, hey, you got to meet this factor, that factor, that factor, that factor. And then maybe if the judge will agree with you, you can bring that CAC interview into evidence and let the jury hear it. Usually I've got to count on that little kid to take the stand and give their story, give that evidence in front of, a jury of 12 or 13 adults, a judge, the table with the defendant and his attorney there, or her attorney there, myself. It's a difficult process. So one of the other big pieces of legislation they're trying to push through now here in Iowa is to allow those CAC interviews into evidence. So I don't have to fight as hard and just cross my fingers and hope that maybe this will be the 1 out of 100 I get to get it in. It's going to allow those CAC interviews to come in. There's still some caveats to it, but it's going to make prosecuting child sex abuse cases so much better for the victims and for the prosecutors. So, yeah, I hope to write a letter to the editor that can maybe get put in the paper here in Spencer. People can see what that legislation says, what it means. But they are trying to push that through now. So yeah, if you have any contacts, please call them and talk to them about that. They'll know what you're talking about.
As far as like legislation for tech companies being held accountable for allowing children to see things they shouldn't see, I noticed today there is some legislation coming through, and we're one of 8 states that's pushing for this, where big tech is starting to have to blur images that are inappropriate, and then they have to have a second factor to log in to see it. So they are starting slowly. I mean, they have the technology to do this. They've chosen not to. So when you see that stuff, that's another area you can get vocal about, because, again, our kids are not looking for the porn. It's hunting them. And they know if they can get a lifelong addiction when a kid's 10 years old, they've made a lot of money off that kid. So when you see that legislation, you need to make those phone calls and send those emails. But we are one of 8 states that's actually finally working on it.
I can tell you something that our department is, and it's nationwide, and this is a bit of a landmine of a subject, so there might be some disagreement in this very room, but the end-to-end encryption and privacy on a lot of these apps is making our job as investigators much more difficult. It's a lot of times the evidence that we're getting is the evidence that is coming from these companies, the records, as far as the conversations and the content that's going back and forth. And as we get more and more of these social media companies that are using and marketing their end-to-end encryption and saying flat out, you want to use this because it means we don't even have access to what you're doing on our app and what you're using our app for. I mean, you're giving predators a free reign to do whatever they want there, whether it's exchanging child pornography amongst themselves, having contact with these kids. It's making our job as investigators a lot more difficult. It's starting to neutralize some of the tools like NCMEC has for scanning and automatically detecting child pornography that's going through some of these social media apps. If they can't scan that anymore because it's end-to-end encrypted, then again, it's free reign to be trading that stuff and doing what you please. So it's definitely more of a national conversation. But I think probably the genie's out of the bottle on that. I don't know how you ever put it back in, but that is something we can always use support for too, is trying to get some of those workarounds.
Yeah, and anytime we increase privacy for ourselves, we make it easier for predators to act. And I know that we've seen a massive influx of these. You picture in your head what you thought a predator looked like years ago, some creepy guy sitting in a room somewhere. They found community online, acceptance, and even competition. And now they're live streaming their crimes, so you have no shot at finding it unless someone's dumb enough to record it. And they're coming in from overseas so fast we can't keep up. But they have to do things probably on a weekly basis to prove they're not law enforcement that are indescribable, like violate another victim in indescribable ways because they can't use an old photo. So it's hard for you guys.
The conversations I've personally seen on apps like, I think it was Telescope, one of the end-to-end encrypted apps and I was able to see it because I got it off of somebody's device who I was already investigating for something else. Well, more child exploitation and enticement and production. But he was having a conversation within this child pornography enthusiast community on this app, and talking to somebody on there, well, are you still dating this person? You still have your girlfriend or whatever? And he said, no, I broke up with her. So it was probably for the best, was the response. Girlfriends are really only good for helping you groom the younger ones. So those are the conversations that's happening on these platforms. I know the arguments to be made for these secure communications when it comes to, freedom fighters in Syria and wherever else, and freedom of the press in more restrictive areas. But it's also really enabling some really horrific people to do some really horrific things that we're only catching the very, very tip of the iceberg on. So.
Any other questions from our audience tonight? Okay. Well, then I guess it's time to wrap this up. And first of all, I would like to go through a lot of thank yous tonight. I'd like to thank our friends at the Spencer Library, Robin Munson, Sarah Beth Foxen, for really organizing this entire panel presentation tonight. They've done a lot of legwork with regard to getting this put together. A lot of Zoom conferences and meetings have taken place over the last few months with regard to this. I'd also like to thank our audience here tonight. And I know anytime you schedule something, as I said earlier, and then you have to postpone it 2 months later, the attendance is probably going to be a little bit down. But that brings me to my next thank you, and I'm really thankful that SMU was here tonight and was able to record this, because I think this will reach a broader audience, and I think that this is such an important topic for our community to have more awareness and more understanding of for the kids in our communities. And finally, I would like to thank our panel, Kim, Travis, Matt, Darren, and Andrea. Really thank you for presenting tonight, and all of the knowledge that these people have is just remarkable, and we're very fortunate to have these folks in our communities. So thank you again for your being here tonight, and thank you everyone for being here as well. Have a good evening.
Thank you, Mayor, for helping
Yes.
put this together.
Thank you.